Good morning. I'm hopping on a little bit early because I have a few packages that I'm actually going to be running to the post office. My poor gal that normally picks up for me has just been inundated lately, and so figure since I have to swing by the post office to go take care of an errand, I figured I will just drop it off in the no contact line and just save her a little bit of time. Plus, the pickup app has been really wonky, so that's why I'm hopping on a little bit early. I figured it may as well just do that. The big fun thing that we're doing today is you guys get to ask me any question you want about essential oils, and I will see if I can't give you a good answer. I know I had some questions come in over the weekend, and I did respond to those questions, so I can always give you guys those questions if you don't have a question for me. And can I just say this? I know I say it all the time, but there really is no such thing as a silly question. There's not, because we don't know what we don't know. And with essential oils, we are constantly learning new things about the constituents found in them, about how those synergies work together. I mean, it's a very quickly evolving science. So that being said, feel free to ask your questions, and if not, I will share one of the questions that I got over the weekend. Drinking my tea. We had some crazy low temperatures here for the desert, and when I say desert, we sit in the 70s, 80s during the winter. It doesn't really get cold here. It's beautiful. And it hit the 40s overnight and then was in the 60s during the day, and I totally wasn't ready for it. So I've got my long fleece pants on and my sweater turtleneck thing on. I'm freezing. Anyway, so the first question that I was asked, and this is a pretty common one, is why is there such a difference in peppermints? And this is a really good question because there's a lot that goes into this. So this is what I'm going to tell you. Even if a peppermint is grown in ideal conditions, and ideal conditions can mean where you have a fertile soil, where the crop is only being grown once and harvested once, and where there's no drought conditions, you get ample amounts of rain. Those are the good conditions that we hope to have when we're getting a quality peppermint. There can still be some variances, and the reason comes down to the soil. Even if you have good nutrients in the soil in, say, Italy is not going to be the same as the soil here in the desert. It's not going to be the same as the soil in Washington, where a large portion of the peppermint is grown. The other thing that I did mention, the growing. Growing has everything to do with the quality of the peppermint. I actually know a few farmers who will grow and harvest peppermint at least 3 times a year. Now that's a lot of growing and harvesting. It's really hard on the soil. And so let's say you get that plant material and you distill it, you're going to find that the constituents in that particular oil are going to vary from the constituents grown from a field where the peppermint is only grown and harvested once, one growing season. And there's such a difference because even with adding nutrients to the soil in between growing and harvesting to do those quick turns, you're still not going to get the same product. You're just not. Even if you're hand picking it, you're just not going to. The other thing to consider is that we have a significantly higher demand for peppermint essential oil than what is actually grown when it comes to the plant material. And this is really, really important to remember because what ends up happening is, I want to say it was Adam over at Essential Validation Services. He did a huge research project on peppermint. He was hired by a company and he tested over 77 different peppermints from all over the world. And for those of you that remember this report, it was a pretty big deal. only a very small portion of those peppermints passed. 77 different peppermints and maybe a handful passed. That's a really small number. So that right there tells you that there's going to be some play involved. And when I say play, that can mean two different things. That can mean, one, you've got a company that might be standardizing their oil because there's just not enough of it to go around, so they're combining multiple batches. Or it can mean that it might be adulterated. Now, for me, because I'm not going to go through the effort of standardizing an oil and mixing and matching batches, I consider that to be somewhat adulterous, because when you take one batch and you mix it with another batch, you have added something to one oil, even though both oils might be pure and they're totally okay to use that way. To me, it defeats the purpose of what a distiller has gone through the efforts of doing, the growing, the harvesting, the distilling. And let me tell you, it's not just 3 simple steps. There's a lot that goes into growing. I actually, I started growing a garden this year in the desert. I know, kind of crazy sounding, but it happens and it works. Just so I could get a really good idea. And I planted a whole lot of jalapeno peppers, just so I could get a feel for what a real growing season would be for plant materials. And I do eat a lot of those. And I found that with the jalapeno peppers, they take 90 days to sprout and then another 60 to grow to the right peak where they start blooming. And a lot of times with peppermint, we want to harvest it at a particular time and point, right around the time that it's blooming or right after it's bloomed, somewhere so that it's nice and full. And a lot of times growers will actually stress the plants out before they go to harvest, because you will get a much richer oil. So that being said, peppermint plants, that is done to them. So they'll turn the water off, a week before they go to harvest, so that these plants are really pushing all they can and they're stressing them, and then they harvest them and they have to be distilled freshly. And this is where another variance can come in when it comes to the smell of them. If you get a distiller who is doing mass production, sometimes you will find that they'll distill dried mint. And that's not always a good thing, because it's lost a lot of those highly volatile compounds that we want in the essential oil because it's set out to dry. Now, in some cases, obviously, like ginger, it's okay to do it. It's not going to have that nice fresh zing that you get from distilling the fresh root. But that, again, is another variance that you will find in the smell of peppermint. So there's quite a bit that goes into the distilling. There's quite a bit that goes into the growing and the harvesting. But that should help give you an idea. So obviously the soil, how many times they have grown it, and obviously if there's been enough watering, if the oils have been standardized or adulterated, all these things can cause a variance, even with ideal soil conditions. So I hope that helps answer that question. If any of you have been thinking about that, it's really, really in depth, and there's so much I could say about the chemistry. But that's the gist of it. So yeah, you are definitely going to find, depending on where it's grown in the US or even in the world, you are going to have a peppermint that smells differently. And for some companies that standardize, they are mixing blends from all over, or mixing peppermints from all over the world, not just oils that are grown in one state or one area, but from all over the world. So that peppermint will smell differently. Anybody else have another question? I'm not seeing any comments so far. So hopefully I'm not boring you guys too much with this. There was something else someone asked very, very recently, and it was about internal use. And I pretty much guided the user to one of my blogs, because I have written about internal use a few different times. And the question was, why don't aromatherapists teach some form of general knowledge for the public when it comes to internal use. And here's the reason, guys. Internal use is not taught to most aromatherapists. It is a specialty that you have to take extra coursework for, and it's quite involved. It's not just a matter of understanding how the body works, but understanding how chemical constituents move within the body, so pharmacokinetics, and how they work within the body, the pharmacology side of it. And depending on the individual, depending on their conditions, there will always be a variance. And so there's no way that even someone who is trained in aromatic medicine can possibly give a simple and to the point education to someone who is who's just a general user of them. Now, and the same can be said from an aromatic practitioner to an aromatherapist who hasn't really looked at how all of these things work within the body. And it's not how an essential oil works within the body. It is how essential oil constituents work within the body, how they move within the body, how they're excreted from the body. There's so much information. The pharmacology behind all of it is insane. I mean, if you think about pharmacology and what it is and how it's defined, there's a reason that doctors and pharmacists have to go to school for as long as they do, because this stuff is no joke. And as much as I'd like to say that it's, it's super simple. I mean, I do dose myself with aromatic honey, but I don't do it daily. I don't do it weekly even. I'm very, very cautious on how I do it, because if I can just take my antihistamines, as much as I don't like taking them, I will do that over dosing my body with the extra chemical constituents, just because I'm around essential oils so much that I don't need the extra load on my body. I just don't. So there's a very light answer to that. And if you're curious about that blog, I can post it for you below. Just let me know and I'll post it. I think for now, unless somebody's got questions, I think I'm gonna hop off so I can run to the post office. And if you missed this and you've got a question, I will keep coming back to answer questions today. Today is the day where I answer everybody's questions. So feel free to ask. And like I said, there's no such thing as a silly question. I mean, we all start somewhere. There's no one that knows it all. All right, guys, I'm gonna hop off, go take some packages to the post office, and I'll be back in the office shortly. Have a great day if I don't hear from you.